Last Tuesday, we began our discussion of the actual events that had taken place in Dealey Plaza back on November 22nd of 1963, and we took a look at some of the kind of initial information and evidence that had caused the Dallas Police Department to immediately virtually conclude that Lee Harvey Oswald had been the one who had killed the president, and had gone on to conclude that he had done this all by himself. And so that within 12 hours of the actual shooting of the president, they had gone to a magistrate and gotten a finding of probable cause confirmed by a magistrate. Now, but what we noticed in the evidence that we had found initially, that the immediately available evidence at the time seemed to have mounted a fairly clear circumstantial case against Oswald. For example, that Officer Tippit had been shot an hour and 15 minutes after the president. The president had been shot at 12:30, right after noon, and at 1:46, Officer J.D. Tippit was shot. And we pointed out that 4 shell casings have been found at the site of where Tippit had been shot, and that these represented 2 different brands of 38 shell casings, 38 caliber shell casings. One, there were Winchester Western and Remington Peters. Let's call them just Winchester and Remingtons. And they discovered that the slugs that were in the body of J.D. Tippit, which they discovered when they brought him to the emergency room at Parkland to try to save his life, they discovered that the slugs that were in his body were Winchester and Remington slugs from the 38. But we also found out that the police department had been unable immediately to prove the ballistics on the pistol, because the barrel of the 38 was bigger than the slugs, and therefore they didn't get exact markings going through the barrel. But it was fairly incriminating, because Oswald, who was caught and arrested only something like 16 minutes after Tippit had been shot, after the calls had come in that Tippit had been shot, that the police received a call from a very specific person whose name we know, that in fact a suspicious man had been seen running from the direction of the place where Tippit had been shot and killed, and seemed to be hiding from the police cruisers in the area, and that he had gone into the theater, the Texas Theater, and the person who had identified him as skulking around and hiding from the police had gone into the manager and identified the man to the manager there in the seat in the theater. And the police all came to the theater, 6 squad cars full of them, and they turned the lights on in the theater, and they went up to Oswald, and Oswald jumped up and pulled a 38 from his waistband, which happened to have in it 2 different brands of bullets, Winchesters and Remingtons. And so they brought him in and started interrogating him, and they immediately tried to connect him up to the president's killing. And they had found this Italian Mannlicher Carcano rifle up on the 6th floor of the Texas Book Depository, where they confirmed that Oswald worked, and that they had begun immediately to trace the ownership of the rifle, and came up with the determination that it had been bought in the name of a fellow named Heidel and they looked in the wallet of Oswald after they arrested him, and he had false identification in the same name. So what you get immediately is you get an immediate kind of facial case where the circumstantial evidence seems to be pretty incriminating against Oswald. But then if you look, just at the end of the day, when we were together on Tuesday, I pointed out that if you look a little closer, you discover that while the 4 slugs that were found in Tippett's body were 3 Winchester Westerns and 1 Remington Peters, the shell casings that were found on the ground were 2 Winchester Westerns and 2 Remington Peters. And you say to yourself, that's strange, but it doesn't have the power immediately necessarily to push anybody back from all of the kind of facial circumstantial evidence that seems to come into place against Oswald. What I want to do today is I want to address the Warren Commission, because by the 29th of November, after the killing on the 22nd, just 7 days later, Lyndon Johnson appointed a panel to investigate, to supervise a full-scale investigation of the assassination of the president, ostensibly to determine de novo what it is that had happened. And I pointed out to you that there was a bit of a problem in light of the fact that Hoover had assigned the FBI the task of proving that Oswald did it in their investigation. And so we have ostensibly an objective investigation getting ready to be undertaken into the commission of the crime, but one of the major investigative resources, the FBI, having been instructed to construct a case to prove Oswald did it and that he did it acting alone. So let's take a look at this, the Warren Commission report, the much reviled Warren Commission report that has, down over the years, 50 years now, 49 years for the actual report, has become one of the most widely ridiculed theories since the world is flat theory. And almost nobody credits the Warren Commission report, except for a couple folks whom we read. That you've probably gotten this all read by now. This is Vincent Buglosi's little tome that he has there. And the other one was, I told you, was Gerald Posner's Case Closed. These still remain the two major non-Warren Commission members who insist upon the credibility of the Warren Commission report. I distinguish them from the members of the Commission because one might assume fairly readily that, in fact, all of the Commission members would have unanimously agreed with the Commission's final report, except that isn't true, as it turns out. As it turns out, the two of the members of the Commission themselves asserted that they were unable to agree with the Commission's finding, a key finding, and that is the members of the Commission, and this is something that you'll almost certainly need to know, even if you're at a cocktail party, you'll need to know this, and of course be able to kind of show them that you've taken the course, that you have memorized all the members of the Commission, because it's not a lot of guys. Okay? First one to remember is Chief Justice Earl Warren, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And the second person was Allen Dulles, the former director of the Central Intelligence Agency. That is up until a year or so before the killing. The third person was Richard Russell, the Democratic senator from Georgia. And the third person was a Republican senator from Kentucky, His name is John Sherman Cooper. And so there were two members of the Senate, one Democrat and one Republican. The Democrat being Richard Russell from Georgia, and the Republican being the senator from Kentucky, John Sherman Cooper. Now, the reality is, the important thing is that Richard Russell, the Democratic senator, was the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, one of the most conservative committees in the entire United States Congress, who happen to all be very close to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the military commanders who basically come before the committee consistently asking for more and more money for major weapons systems. So there are two United States senators, one Republican and one Democrat. Then there are two members of the House. One Democrat, Hale Boggs, from Louisiana, and he's the majority whip for the Democrats. And the second House member, the Republican member, was Gerald Ford, the chairman of the House Republican Conference. So you see that the people that are being chosen here are, with the exception of Gerald Ford, all Southerners. They're all Southerners. And you'll remember that the reason why Kennedy had gone down to Texas in November of 1963 is because the South was basically in rebellion within the Democratic Party against Kennedy because of his reaching out to provide assistance to black students registering in the black universities.
Are these Democrats more part of the Dixiecrat
side
of it?
These are Dixiecrats. You got Louisiana, you got Georgia. These are classic Dixiecrat states. So there's two senators, one Republican, one Democrat, both Southern. Two members of the House, Hale Boggs from Louisiana, the Democratic majority whip, and Gerald Ford, the chairman of the House Republican Conference. And then, as it's referred to by the Commission itself, two selected from the private sector, both lawyers by profession. One of whom is Alan Dulles, as I mentioned, and the other is John J. McCloy, the U.S. High Commissioner for Germany, and in World War II was the Assistant Secretary of War under Henry Stimson. Turns out both Henry Stimson and John J. McCloy, both senior partners of Brown Brothers Harriman. So that you have a commission now where you have it headed up by the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, two United States senators, one Democrat, one Republican, two members of the House, one Democrat, one Republican, both in very prestigious political positions, the Democratic whip and the chairman of the Republican caucus, and two people from the private sector, one who just happens to be Alan Dulles, chief counsel at Sullivan & Cromwell, legal counsel for Brown Brothers Harriman, and and the other lawyer, John McCloy, an assistant secretary of war under Henry Stimson, chief senior partner at Brown Brothers Harriman. So this is the group, and as I said, one would assume that all the members of the Warren Commission would unanimously agree with their decision, except for two of these members, one of which is Chief Justice Earl Warren, and the other one was Richard Russell, the Democratic senator from Georgia, both of whom said that they were unable to accept the thesis of the principal central thesis of the Warren Commission, which we'll talk about in some detail today, which is the so-called magic bullet theory. And while we don't want to, at least at this stage in the class, get too far down into the weeds over trajectories and bullet speeds, etc., what we do want to point out is that there was originally a very clear conclusion on the part of the Dallas Police Department and echoed immediately by the FBI, that there were only 3 shots fired at the president. And this was confirmed in their mind by some of the witnesses, some 82% of the witnesses. 82% of the witnesses, according to the commission report, who were interviewed, said that they believed that there were only 3 shots. And that 75% of those people believed that those 3 shots all came from the 6th floor of the book depository. And this was confirmed by the fact that there were 3 rifle shell casings found lying on the floor. 2 of them immediately beneath the window of the 6th floor in the southwestern corner, the southeast corner rather of the building. So there's 2 expended Mannlicher Carcano rifle shell casings directly beneath the window, and a third some 45 inches away. All on the right side, it would have been expelled from a bolt action rifle, such as the Mannlicher Carcano rifle. So, in order for that to be true, for there are only 3 shots. If there were only 3 shots, they could have been gotten off with the Mannlicher in the time period, they thought, that the 3 shots were reported as having been fired at the president. So that there were a series of pieces of evidence around which very immediately would cause even a reasonable person, as distinct from the Dallas Police Department, even a reasonable person to immediately come to the preliminary conclusion that things seem to be pretty obvious here. Seem to be pretty obvious that since they found the Mannlicher right there. Yes.
How would the witnesses know where the shots came from? Wasn't there like an echo of the building?
Yeah, but it's true. There's a lot of information later on determined about echoes in this particular area of Dealey Plaza. But when they interviewed the people, just in that first day or two, 82% of them said that they thought that the bullets, that the sounds that they had heard, had come up from up and behind them, up to the Dallas, the book depository. That's what the interviews said. And what I want to point out here today, and again, I'm saying that the way that I want to structure our discussions over the 10 weeks is I want to be able to present to you today the information that makes it almost certain that the Warren Commission is correct in their conclusion that Oswald killed the president and that he killed the president all by himself. And it really reduces to a few simple pages that despite the fact that 2 of the members of the commission, Richard Russell and Chief Justice Earl Warren, said that they just couldn't believe the single bullet theory. I'm going to explain the single bullet theory for you, and then we're going to discuss it. Yes?
Not about ballistics, but
yes.
Just since you just mentioned Dulles earlier, is much known about his background before this? Like, did he ever do anything vengeful for anyone, or any history of that?
Oh, there's a long history. We'll discuss it. There is a long history.
So prior to this happening,
yeah.
he had, if somebody had wronged him, he had a history of...
Well, there are various types of conduct that one might have been engaged in prior to this that would tend to lead in the direction that you're talking about, and we'll touch on those. That what I want to point out here today is that let me be clear about what it is that the Warren Commission said. They said, look, that they believe that since 82% of the people that were interviewed said that there were 3 shots, and they found 3 spent shell casings right near the window on the 6th floor of the book depository. They in fact came to the conclusion that one of the bullets first hit the president. The very first shot fired, they thought, hit the president high on the right-hand shoulder and exited his throat. And that bullet came out of the president and went into the right rear shoulder of John Connally, who was sitting in front of the president in the passenger side of the front seat, actually in the jump seat in the front. And that bullet had then exited just below the right nipple of John Connally and had struck him in the wrist and had then gone into his leg and lodged in his thigh. And very importantly, when John Connally was rushed to the Parkland Hospital along with the president, taken into a separate room to work on him to make sure that he survived, they found on a gurney in the hallway, not in the operating room, not removed from John Connally, but found on a gurney in the hallway of the hospital, they found a bullet, the so-called magic bullet, the so-called pristine bullet. That there are many famous photographs of around. One of which is right here. That will be able to see it. I don't have one of those little dealies, but you see it here at the top of the photographs in Bugolosi's book. There is a virtually unblemished bullet. This is the photograph, the official photograph from the Warren Commission, showing this bullet. And the theory of the commission was that this bullet hit the president in the upper right shoulder, came out his neck, went into the right rear shoulder of John Connally, came out because it was on a downward trajectory, came out below his nipple, hit him broke his wrist, and then went into his leg, into his thigh. And then it must have lost so much momentum during doing all of those things that it just fell out on the gurney. And they happened to find it there. Now, then there was obviously a second shot that exploded President Kennedy's head, that everyone witnessed this happening. And they concluded that there was a third shot, but that they concluded that the third shot must have missed everything. Because there's a report that a bullet hit the curb near where the limousine was and sent splinters flying and hit a bystander. Greg, what was his name?
Tagg.
Tagg?
Yeah, James Tagg.
James Tagg. Okay. And so they've got all of that information. And so they concluded that the second shot must have, or actually the first shot missed entirely. Second shot hit the president and Connally, and the third shot hit the president and killed him. Now, this so-called magic bullet has caused a lot of controversy. Not the least of which was that two of the 7 members of the commission themselves dissented and said that they didn't believe it. So you've got 5 of the 7 asserting that they did believe it. No.
I just got to say,
Yeah.
Is that Bugolosi's book that was basically saying Richard Russell and
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Federal horn, because, there are quotations later from John Sherman Cooper that
Oh, that's right.
basically said the same thing.
That's right.
He never agreed with the single bullet.
That's right. So that there is this fundamental problem with the commission, in the sense that some of its members were dissenting about this critical element, because, as it turns out, that this had to be so, because if in fact John Connally and President Kennedy were not hit with the same bullet, then there would have had to have been 4 shots. There would have had to have been the shot that missed everything and hit off the curb and wounded teeth. And then there would have been the one that hit the president in the back. And then there was the one that hit the president in the head. And then there would have to be another shot that hit Connally. So they were insisting that this shot had to be the same one. And yet, because of the pristine quality of the bullet, because of the peculiar way in which it was found, lying on the gurney, a lot of people just didn't believe that. And besides that, there was an additional 18% of the people who said that they heard a 4th shot or more. Now, that if in fact there was a 4th shot, what becomes so critical about this is the fact is that within the time frame in which the shots were all fired, it would have been impossible to fire 4 shots with the Mannlicher Kakano in that period of time. That you would not have been able to work the bolt action and fire 4 shots. To say nothing about being able to hit anything. But to be able to even fire 4 shots in that period of time would have been physically impossible. And so it became absolutely critical for the commission to determine that only 3 bullets were fired, and that one of them therefore had to have hit both the president and Connally. And this becomes the crux of the beginning of the controversy around the assassination. That all of the other circumstantial evidence seemed to point to Oswald. That because what they said was, look, here's the Mannlicher Kakano rifle found on the 6th floor within feet of where the firings took place. Here's 3 shells, Mannlicher Kakano shell casings, right there. And they checked up and found out that he owned a Mannlicher Kakano rifle. And they had caught him, with the pistol that matched the brand names of the shells that were used to kill Tippit, right within an hour of the president. And so all of the circumstantial evidence pushed toward this conclusion. And what I do today is I say I want to address the issues, not to get into the ones that will be dealt with in some of the conspiracy theories as to why it is they don't believe the Warren Commission. What I want to point out to you, however, is some rather extraordinary information that developed after the initial investigations had concluded that Oswald had been the killer and had resulted in his criminal charges prior to his having been killed and predicated upon the circumstantial evidence that I've reviewed so far. And I want to just touch upon them. That as Bugliosi says in his tome at page 806, and there's just 12 pages of Bugliosi that become really critical. And I may, even though I've got a lot of markings and notes on these things, I may have these copied and put up on eCommons for you, so that you'll be able to see them. But I want to just go over it briefly with you today, from page 806 to 818. There's a discussion by Bugliosi of the work that the Warren Commission did to look into this particular facially circumstantial evidence. And what he points out is that the principal evidence connecting the bullets that struck President Kennedy with Oswald's rifle, therefore establishing the identity of the assassin as being Oswald, are 2 bullet fragments that were found in the presidential limousine on the night of the assassination. He then goes on to describe these fragments. We're not talking yet about the magic bullet. We're talking about fragments that were found in the limousine. Okay? There are 2 fragments. One is Warren Commission Exhibit number 567. And the second is Warren Commission Exhibit 569. And they were both found up in the front driver's section of the limousine. One on the seat, and this is 569, and it weighed to the 2 fragments. This, I'll tell you how much each weighed here. The first fragment was basically 1/3 of a bullet. It weighed 44.6 grains, or 1/10 of an ounce, about 1/3 of the weight of an intact 6.5 millimeter Mannlicher Carcano bullet. Okay, and the second one, Exhibit 569, was actually 1/8 of a whole bullet. It weighed 21 grains. And what they did is they were trying to figure out whether or not there were large enough pieces, those 2 fragments of a bullet. They were trying to figure out whether they could be tracked to the Mannlicher Carcano rifle. And what he lays out in some detail here is he points out that 2 firearms experts, Robert Frazier, who was the FBI's chief lab person that dealt with ballistic evidence, and Joseph Nickel at ICOL, who was the superintendent of the Bureau of Criminal Investigation of the state of Illinois. They both performed initial ballistics tests on these 2 fragments. And what they were able to determine was that there were adequate striations on the bullets to be able to track them to the Mannlicher Carcano rifle that was owned by Oswald. And then they ran the tests on the pristine bullet, the so-called magic bullet, and they discovered that of the 161 grains of a full bullet, there were 158.6 grains remaining of that bullet. So that it had, in fact, lost about 2 grains. But what they did is that had the full set of striations on that bullet, and they tracked it to the Mannlicher Carcano rifle. The reason that then what they did is they recovered fragments of a bullet from the wrist of Governor Connally. That when the bullet had gone through Governor Connally, it had gone allegedly through the president first, coming in his shoulder and coming out his throat, and had gone into the back right shoulder of Connally and come out below his nipple, and it nicked a rib, the 5th rib of Connally, and then it hit his wrist bone, the bullet, and then they found fragments in Connally's wrist. And what happened is later they ran spectrographic tests on those fragments. the fragments that were in the wrist of Connolly were so small that they didn't have adequate surface to track the striations to the rifle with the grooves in the rifle. So what they did is they subjected it to a test, which is NASA has a set of equipment in which they can actually take any material and they can heat it to such a high degree that it will dissolve, actually, and it will give off radiation. They'll expose it to radiation, and it will give off radiation. And they confirmed to an absolute degree of certainty that the fragments in the wrist of Connolly they matched the fragments that were found in the front seat, which had in fact been confirmed to belong to the Mannlicher Kakano rifle. So they know for a certainty that the fragments in the front seat matched the fragments in Connolly's wrist, and that the fragments in the front seat matched the rifle. And then what they found was they found the palm print of Oswald on the Mannlicher. And they found his fingerprints on the trigger guard of the Mannlicher. So what we have here now, then what they did is they found, and this is a critical piece of evidence, they found fragments of lead in the president's brain, and they matched them to the fragments that had been found in the front seat by doing the radioactive tests. So what they're saying is that scientific tests were performed that proved that the fragments of the bullets found in the front seat of the limousine belonged to and had been fired from Oswald's Mannlicher Kakano rifle, and that those matched the fragments taken from the president's brain, demonstrating that there was no second rifle, that the president had been shot with the same rifle that in fact had generated the fragments that were in the front seat, and that those were traced directly to the Mannlicher Kakano rifle. And they took a piece of the bullet, the magic bullet, and they matched it using the same test. They showed that in fact that it had come from the same batch of bullets that the fragments had come from, which they tracked to the Mannlicher. So what you see is that even though the evidence that was put forth immediately in the immediate aftermath of the killing of the president, all of this circumstantial evidence that we talked about on Tuesday, that caused the police to believe virtually immediately that Oswald was the one that had killed the president, that upon further analysis, upon deeper analysis, subjecting the material in the car to these types of highly reliable scientific investigations, it was confirmed that the bullet that hit Connolly came from the Mannlicher, and that the fragments of bullets that were in the front seat matched the Mannlicher, and that the fragments of the bullets that were found in the president's skull and brain matched those in the front seat. This would put any person that I've encountered in 44 years of legal practice into prison for their life for having killed the president. So the question arises is in the face of this kind of evidence, how is it possible? How is it possible that so many people don't believe that Oswald shot and killed the president? That, of course, is going to be the subject matter of a lot of the remaining sessions that we have together. Because what I want to be able to do today is I want to be able to put in front of us a corpus of evidence and information that will cause you to be extremely skeptical about each one of the theories that are being presented in the remainder of this course. And I say that in order to support virtually any of those theories, one is going to have to deal with this evidence. Okay? So, now, one's immediate response would be, and I can see it in your eyes, is, well, what happens, what if somebody else fired Oswald's Mannlicher Kakana rifle from either the sixth floor of the book depository or some other equivalent location around Daly Plaza, and framed up Oswald for it? Because it wouldn't be too hard to imagine that if that were his rifle, that his palm print and fingerprints would be on it, and that therefore the use of that rifle in killing the president wouldn't necessarily mean that Oswald did it. So that would basically eliminate all of the conspiracy theories that didn't include the rifle being the murder weapon, which would likely eliminate the second gun theory, that somehow the president was killed by a fourth shot fired from the grassy knoll by someone else. So what you need to start doing now is that you need to start putting up a filter, this filter of this evidence that is being tendered to the Warren Commission, proving by every scientific test that is reasonably available at the time that the Mannlicher was used to kill the president. And it turns out that the magic bullet theory turns out to be true. And that bullet did in fact pass through the president and did in fact hit Connally. And it didn't require it swooping around and going in a 45-degree angle before going into it, because, as it turns out, John Connally was not sitting directly in front of the president. He was sitting below and to the left of the president in the jump seat. And therefore it would have been entirely not only possible, but very likely that a bullet passing through the president coming from above and behind would have in fact struck the governor as well. Okay? So that is the objective of my presenting this evidence to you. And this is the evidence that will be remembered, I think, down through time as the evidence set forth by Bugliosi from page 806 to 818 in his book. It's 12 pages of detailed scientific information which establishes that the magic bullet theory is true and that the president was killed with the Mannlicher Kakana rifle that belonged to Lee Harvey Oswald. and it bore Lee Harvey Oswald's palm print and fingerprints. And the witnesses, beyond any dispute, have placed Lee Harvey Oswald in the book depository at 12:30, and they have confirmed consistently that the Mannlicher Kakana rifle was found there on the 6th floor within basically 40 minutes of the president's having been shot, and that the shell casings were found there. And it turns out that they have confirmed that the shell casings were in fact fired by the Mannlicher. So that it wasn't just some other Mannlicher shells that were lying on the floor. Because what they did is they reviewed the firing pin pattern. That when a firearm fires a particular bullet, the firing pin strikes a little point at the back of the bullet casing, the shell casing, and detonates a spark which explodes the gunpowder, which propels the bullet, the slug, out of the shell casing through the weapon, and it has a rifling inside the barrel, which causes the bullet to spin so as to increase its trajectory, to increase its accuracy. And it is passing through the barrel that it picks up these unique characteristics from the unique structure inside the particular barrel. And that they have traced the magic bullet to, and that's the slug itself, to the Mannlicher through the unique striations on the bullet. And they have tracked the casings that were on the floor through the pin strike, the firing pin strike, to the Mannlicher. So those 3 shell casings found on the floor next to below the window, in fact, have been perfectly matched to the Mannlicher. And the magic bullet found on the gurney was matched to the Mannlicher. And the fragments in the front seat were tracked to the Mannlicher.
Does it say how exactly the casings were found?
Yes. See, what it says is that two of the casings were found just off to the right of the sill. There was a set of boxes. The book boxes were built up in such a way that there was what they call the rifle rest, so that the rifle could be kept out the window and balanced on the books. And when one would have ejected the shell casings, they would have fallen off to the right. And they were found off to the right, 2 of them below the window, at right angles to the window, which would have been the case if you ejected it. And the other one was found 45 millimeters or something further away. And there's actually a photo. There's actually a photograph of the shell casings that were found. You see, I guess there's two sets of photographs that he has here that you can't see them very well, but right here are the shell casings. Here's the window, and here are 2 of the shell casings right on the floor here. And the other one is over here, right in what they call the sniper's nest. Okay, so what you have to come to the conclusion based on this evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald's rifle was used to kill the president, and that the same bullet hit the president and hit Governor Connally. And therefore, there could have been only 3 shots. And it would account for the first shot that missed, that injured the Teague. There is the shot that hit both the president and John Connally. And then there's the 3rd and fatal shot that killed the president. that all three of them could have been fired within the limited amount of time.
I didn't want to like bring up extra points or anything.
Yes.
So I'm going to stick with
The
the
theory.
thesis.
Yes.
That's up here, but so the implication with respect to mass of these bullets, one's completely gone. So there's no trace of it. It's gone somewhere.
The one that hit the
Maybe
one
it
that hit the
maybe it hit.
yeah. It was, they couldn't tell whether it was either concrete, a piece of concrete that hit him, or a fragment of a bullet. They didn't find any of that.
And so now you have fragments that are sitting over on the driver's side.
Yes.
That are of certain substantial size.
Yes, those measurements that I gave
And
you.
we can assume that that did not come from the magic bullet, because the magic bullet itself, if it is the magic bullet, has such a weight compared to the total weight of the bullet.
Well, the magic bullet, we have the he has given us the details here. It says the magic bullet weighs of the total 161 grains is a totally pristine bullet. This one weighs 158.4. So it's missing 1.4. See, no, 2.4 grains.
Right. So
2.4 grains, and the fragments are 44.6 grains and 23 grains.
So they clearly were
From a different
bullet.
They
And presumably, if it was the bullet that went through the back and then neck and then into Connolly.
yeah.
So the only mass that we would have to subtract from the magic bullet
Are the ones that were found in his
whatever
wrist.
they found in his wrist.
That's exactly right.
Otherwise, the other bullet that would have had to come from the supposed behind shot
Yep.
that caused that big orange.
Yes.
If that big orange
That's
blood
right.
is
real.
Is real.
That's right.
Okay.
So that's what we're dealing with.
So we don't know how much those weigh. They were too tiny to be.
Yes. What we do know is that that Bugliosi does not list
What they weigh.
the size of those, except that it was acknowledged that those were too small to have been able to find out whether there were any striations on them that matched the rifle.
But they weren't too small to radiate and finally
No.
came from the same guy.
No, they weren't too small to radiate.
It would be interesting to know how much those.
That's right. And therefore you begin to start to look. You start to begin to look for that information. How much did those particular fragments found in the wrist of Connolly weigh? And if they were able to confirm that they matched the bullets in the front seat, okay, but you know that those didn't come from the pristine bullet, what is this starting to tell you? So this isn't a math course. The reality is that in dealing with evidence, you have to think in some sense mathematically. You have to begin to try to figure out if you know those kind of interesting tests they used to give us all the time, that if A is such and such and B is such and such, then what is C? You know, these entire kind of things you have to be able to do. So that if in fact the pristine bullet weighed 158.6 grains and an original bullet weighs 161 grains, you know that they're missing 2.4 grains, and you know that the other ones are 44.6 grains and 21 grains. You know that they didn't come from the magic bullet. Yeah.
Does Bugliosi discuss the time frame for the entire sequence? The 5.6 seconds?
No. What he does here is he addresses this evidence, which is in his mind effectively dispositive of the assertions that all of the assertions that the magic bullet couldn't have hit both of them.
But I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
the motivation for the magic bullet theory are those specific time frames.
Oh yes, no, that's true.
5.6 seconds.
That's true.
The entire thing.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt.
Right, but there's 1.8 seconds between the firing potentially of one and the other, and no expert could fire it faster than 2.3 seconds.
That's right.
half second.
No, there's going to be a whole lot of time spent on analyzing from a different perspective why one might have questions about this. But from this particular perspective, what you're experiencing here is what I referred to earlier, and was referred to in one of the two articles that I had you read, is the power of narrative. That the power of this narrative of listing these fragments and the weights of the fragments and the tests that were performed on them, in fact, if you stay within the confines of this narrative, that it makes it perfectly obvious that the Mannlicher counter rifle fired these bullets and that they killed the president, and that one of the bullets went through both of them.
So is it that 73% of Americans, they don't believe that Lee Harvey Oswald killed them, or is it that they don't believe that he killed them alone?
No, that they're combined together. There's 73% of the American people right now either don't believe he killed him at all, or believe that if he did, it was part of a conspiracy. Okay, so that you have to then you look for those statistics and say, look at, you're going to feel more comfortable being now involved in the thing that if he did kill him, that it was part of a larger conspiracy.
He doesn't. Does Pugliosi go over the initial statements by the DA, any of that?
Not in this section. See, what you're doing is you're all looking for ways out of this, and that's the point of this discussion today. Is that the fact of the matter is that if this is true, and if the Mannlicher was fired from above and behind, and did fire 3 shots, and one of them did go through both the president and Connolly, and the third shot that killed the president left fragments, bullet fragments in his skull that radiologically matched the component elements of the fragments that were found in the front seat. And the fragments that were found in the front seat were able to be tracked ballistically to the Mannlicher. And the pristine bullet has been tracked to the Mannlicher. That you're beginning to get a triangulation of facts, which basically, no matter what else anybody says, you know that the Mannlicher was used to kill the president. And the Mannlicher fired the shot that hit both of them. And that presents a corpus of facts that you're going to have to deal with all the time with any of the other theories. And so that you get the immediate question of the 73%. Is there some group in there that I can associate with and save my integrity that is going to acknowledge that Oswald did it, but then he was part of another operation, a pawn or something?
Did these spectrographic tests confirm that all of these bullet fragments were fired from the same rifle, or did they confirm that they came from the same batch of bullets?
What they were able to confirm was that the magic bullet was fired from the rifle because it had the striations on it, and they were able to confirm that the 2 fragments that were found in the front seat were fired from the rifle because there were adequate striations on it. And then what they were able to do is, through the spectrographic test, they were able to prove that the fragments that were in the wrist of Connolly, in fact, that they matched the same fragments. Interesting, the same fragments. Okay, and they also matched the fragments that were found in the president's brain. The question that you didn't ask is, did they perform any spectrographic tests on the magic bullet and confirm that it matched the fragments in Connolly's wrist? Because they're basically asserting that was the bullet that hit his wrist, and it was still relatively pristine. Okay, so you're angling in on the question that you're going to have to ask. So what I wanted to do is I want to confront you with what it feels like to be the jury after the prosecutor has presented his or her best witness. And everybody gets kind of rocked back on their heels and said, whoa, if this person is telling me the truth, then the defendant sitting in the seat there is guilty. And so you're looking for some way out of that.
When you say you want us to find a way out, so are you saying you want us to go with, be taking the position of the Warren Commission, finding a way out of the theories, or?
Well, what I'm saying is that you're going to have to come to grips with this evidence. That no matter what else however else you try to construct a theory as to who killed the president and why they did it, that you have to cope with this evidence. Now, I'll give you a little bit of help here at the beginning, and I don't want to go too far down this line right now. We're going to get a lot of time to talk about it in the next section. But the point is that who performed the test, and what are their backgrounds, and what might have been their motivation, because then what you're dealing with is simply fabricated information. But if the information is true, it's dispositive. But if it ain't, it ain't. And so, but those are the kind of things that you need to look to, so that if you're the attorney that's doing the cross-examination of that particular person, you don't want to waste your time digging in and trying to destroy the credibility of those kind of tests. What you want to do is look at the credibility of the particular witness and where they came from and what their potential motive is for having simply fabricated this. That you remember the famous the famous O.J. Simpson glove, right? And I don't want to confuse you with other cases, but the bottom line is that a glove was purportedly found at the death scene with blood and everything on it, and that they tried to figure out whether it fit O.J. Simpson, and they also found a pair of socks in his home, and they purportedly found blood stains on the socks, and that the witness for the Los Angeles Police Department came on and testified that he had performed tests on the blood samples found on his socks recovered by the police in his bedroom, and that it matched the blood of the victim, his wife. And the cross-examination then was directed toward, why is there formaldehyde in the blood? And because it turns out that the blood that was on the socks had been preserved in formaldehyde, which was a bad moment for the prosecution. But those are the kind of things that when the actual initial evidence was put in front of the jury, here are the bloody socks, found in his bedroom with the blood of the victim on them. And if the defense doesn't do an adequate job and find out that there's formaldehyde in the blood, the defendant's done for. Okay? So what I'm saying here is that if you accept this evidence that has been set forth by Bugliosi, if you accept it as bona fide, then you're going to have to come to the conclusion that the Mannlicher Carcano rifle was used to kill the president, and was the bullet, it fired the bullet that went into Connolly and injured Connolly, and the fragments that were in his wrist matched the bullets that came from the fragments that came from the Mannlicher. And so that you're right in the question that was put, is that, well, in a certain sense, doesn't all that prove is that the Mannlicher was used to kill them, was used to kill the president? doesn't prove that Oswald fired the shots. The mere fact that his palm print's on it and the fingerprint is on the trigger housing doesn't prove anything if it was his rifle, because they would be there. But on the other hand, it's a little incriminating to have your rifle kill the president. You know.
Did the Warren Commission have access to the footage of the assassination that we can see today?
Yes, they have the Zapruder film, which is the critical visual evidence. That there's lots of other things, and we'll touch upon that because additional photographs have been found and additional footage has been found. Other footage, film footage that was taken, has disappeared mysteriously into the bowels of the FBI and other places that you wonder about.
In those videos, is there sound? Can you hear the 3 shots? Is it a very clear 3 shots?
Well, that's the right questions. Those are the right questions, and those are going to be questions that you need to address, and that those of you who the question dawns on are going to look into that, and you're going to write your paper on that. You're going to say, I've taken a look at this argument that there were only 3 shots, and I've checked the Zapruder film soundtrack, and I found the Dick DeBelt, that was on the policeman's motorcycle, and I believe that they were all fired within a sequence of time that would have been impossible for one rifle firing. This one rifle firing, anyway.
I was just going to say, another place to look would be what happened to the limo.
That's right.
Immediately after, not soon after.
Yeah, you notice the pressure to try to get out of this thing. There's got to be some reason here. There's got to be some problem. Yes.
Does anybody know if Oswald was like an expert shooter?
Yeah. There's a famous comment by Russell, Senator Russell. Is he checked on that very question. So you can become the senator from Georgia. I'm not sure what the second prize is, he loved to talk about the fact that he checked on the marksmanship value of Oswald, and at the firing range he got Maggie's drawers. And that's a famous thing in Marines. When you fire at the targets, if you miss the entire target, they have this big flag that they just wave back and forth like this that they call Maggie's drawers. And they said that he got Maggie's drawers. He couldn't even hit the target. Say nothing about being able to get into the bullseye, and yet they assert that he hit the president 2 out of 3 shots.
How accurate is the Mannlicher?
The Mannlicher is another. It's referred to as the humanitarian's rifle. If that gives you some idea. It was reported to be the least accurate firearm ever made by the human family. So, and you say, well, if a person were a professional assassin, one wouldn't be likely to use this. Therefore, the question, was Oswald a professional assassin? Is the thesis that's being espoused that he was a professional assassin?
Did anyone wonder if someone had plans to kill the president on a specific day, why they would carry their own identification and their alias identification this time on their person?
Yes. They've wondered that. They have wondered that. You're the second person to have wondered that. No, they're more than you and the other person. So the question again comes back to, is this guy conducting himself like a professional assassin? He clearly isn't. But then, on the other hand, does the thesis that is set forth by the Warren Commission require him to have been a professional assassin? And the answer to that is clearly no. The entire thesis of the Warren Commission is that he's basically a nutcase. That he's just a nutcase, and that he's gone around shooting at other people. That on April 10th of 1963, for example, they go into some detail about how he tried to kill General Edwin Walker, and that he fired a shot at him with this rifle. less accurately this time. But came home and told his wife about it, and kept the rifle and put it in the garage of a stranger. Actually, Miss Ruth Payne put the rifle in the garage, wrapped it up in a little blanket, and left it there. According to the theory. So what you want to be able to do is that in light of the persuasiveness, at least the facial persuasiveness of these 12 pages of scientific information about the bullets and bullet fragments in the car, that what you want to be able to do is you want to try to figure out what does this thesis basically maintain about the professional caliber of Oswald, about his accuracy as a marksman, as to his intelligence as a professional assassin, carrying his identification around. Worse yet, carrying 2 different identifications around. And carrying the pistol that he kills a police officer with. And then takes the shells out and throws them on the ground. Right in front of everybody. If he shouldn't be executed for killing a president, he should be executed for being stupid. Period, as the old saying goes. But anyway, so that's yes.
Did they ever get a clear alibi on where Oswald was at the time? Like, did anybody ever get?
Oh yes, there's a whole lot of discussion about that, down to sort of a microsecond, as to where was he at 12:30. Where, and there's all this stuff about the big there's the Hertz time clock there in Dealey Plaza. We've seen different exact photographs of the time clock as to exactly what time things happened, and where was he exactly at that point. Who saw him? Did anybody see him up on the 6th floor? Who saw him in the lunchroom? What did he say about where he was? All of these things are become critical. And what I'm trying to do at this stage is before we go down into the weeds, what I'm trying to do is give you the broad perspective here, and that is that we've got devastating scientific evidence in front of us here. Devastating scientific evidence if it bears out to be true, linking all of these shots to the Mannlicher, and there being no second rifle. Yes, Wes?
Was there like an element of embarrassment almost in our Secret Service, like if he's able to do this, kill the president with a completely inaccurate rifle, and then kill a cop afterwards, and then just stumble off into a movie theater, and the only reason that they have any clue where he is because of some random guy following him around?
Yes. There's some degree of embarrassment. You might have a follow-up question: is what degree of embarrassment do you think you have? And I would guess that it's fairly high. In fact, we know that it's fairly high because there's a number of the Secret Service guys who have talked about it and written about it, and in what kind of condition some of those guys are in now because of the kind of despair that they suffer. I'm not talking about Clint Eastwood in the other movie that he made, or in The Line of Fire, where he pretended he was completely guilt-ridden, years later. But they are. Yes. Give me your name because I'll remember.
My name is Najee.
Najee, right.
So the whole thing with the time's building up this question. You said that it was at 1:46 was when he killed Tibbet.
No, when Tibbet was killed.
Yeah.
It's just a wool on this side of the sheet that we can see.
The reading that was on e-comment just said 1:16. So now there's conflicting times. So how accurate are the times?
Well, no, actually, we'll check that. We'll check that out. Okay. I mean, it's conceivable that I may have misspoken. I don't want to give us false leads on this, but that was my recollection at the time. But we'll check that to be sure. We'll get a solid time on that one. Alan?
I just had a comment on Secret Service. You said they were hungover, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that would be like a bad thing to do.
Well, but it's not much of an excuse either. By saying, I would have protected him better, but I was really shit-faced the night before, and therefore I wasn't at my best. And I go, well, okay. Okay, good. Back to work. That's true.
Are there other rifles or guns that have a very similar or the same rifling pattern as the gun Oswald had? Or is that completely unique to every gun and it's very obvious on the bullet? Or is there some discrepancy there where it might match this one, but it could be another gun?
It's deadly accurate. That's the problem. That they're and sometimes they're not able to really do it. Like with the pistol, for example, they had this problem that it was an older pistol and had been worn a lot, and that the bullet was smaller than the bore of the rifles or the pistol, so it didn't pick up the striations adequately. And he talks about this. He talks about it in the page 807 to 809. He goes into the details about this type of ballistic evidence and how accurate it is and all that. No, I don't want to get out ahead of ourselves. The problem, the challenge of this evidence is that it was all confirmed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations. All of this information that Bugliosi is putting in here was later confirmed. The details that he gives about the fragments and the tests that were run on them and the ballistic tests and all of that, so that we're not just dealing with the Warren Commission. We've got Alan Dulles on it and John McCloy on it and all of these Dixiecrats and stuff. That we're dealing with the House Select Committee on Assassinations that did in fact come out later, without getting ahead of ourselves, to suggest that they believed that there was a conspiracy. The problem is that they believed that Oswald was part of it. See, which gets you down into that group, that smaller portion of the 73%, who aren't trying to say, well, look, he was just an innocent guy and got set up or anything else. So there's right away we see that there's two subgroups inside our 73% of the people, and a portion of whom believe that he was actually involved in it, and may have been involved in it wittingly or unwittingly, but was involved.
Other than Parkland Hospital, does he go into all to the Bethesda autopsy and what they actually didn't find in the body?
Oh, yeah, no. There's a lot we're going to deal with.
Okay.
What we're dealing with right now is what the evidence is that they laid in here, which if you try to get right down to the core of it, what is the evidence that is, in a sense, the most devastating, the hardest to deal with? And it's this information right here that tracks all of those pieces, and that the House Select Committee on Assassination confirmed it. And so you have to keep asking yourself, well, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? So this is pretty serious stuff here. Okay, so we're into the questions and discussion group here, which we'll have more time after with your folks in the class. But this is the status that we're in right now, and we'll want to talk about, gee, what if this is true? I mean, what if this is true? What if, in fact, Oswald killed the president? And he did it with this rusty old weapon, that people make fun of, and it turns out to be true about the magic bullet that everybody makes fun of, and the people that were on the Warren Commission that everybody makes fun of turned out to be right. What happens if that's true? This isn't a course in psychology or sociology, where we're all trying to figure out, well, why is it that there's so many theories that are different than that? So that we can analyze the American public, put them on a collective couch and analyze them. But what I'm saying here is that this information that Bugliosi has set forth, and that was put forth by the Warren Commission, and was later confirmed by the House Select Committee on Assassinations, is very serious business to have to deal with. because either somebody is falsifying tests here and doing so on multiple occasions, in different groups doing it, or someone has substituted some type of false fragments that weren't really there in the car, or something. That what you have to do is you have to be able to explore to try to figure out, what alternative explanations there are for this. And what you'll discover is that the only people who discover certain facts that set defendants free are people who are devoted to believing the person is innocent. Because if you don't believe the person is innocent, you don't work hard enough to try to find that piece of evidence that exonerates them. Okay? And that's the problem with the FBI. That's the problem with the other people that they brought in on the Warren Commission, is they were all there under the assignment to prove that he did it, and that he did it alone. And so what we will do, after we get through talking about this today, when we come back in on Tuesday, we're going to start down that analysis. Assuming that we've got a very serious challenge in front of us here with this kind of evidence. Because any thesis that one adopts, other than the fact that Oswald did it and he did it by himself, is going to have to come to grips with this information. And you can't just come up with an entire theory that ignores this kind of information. So it has to integrate this, and you have to explain how this information got generated, if in fact something else happened that's different than this. Okay, so that's where we're at right now.
Are we in the discussion now? Or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the Warren Commission's website says that they rank a shooter by three different. You can be an expert, a sharpshooter, or a marksman, and they rank it from 250 to 190. And they said that as a Marine, he was tested twice, in 1956 and 1959. In 56, after a 3-week training period, that he made it sharpshooter, which was 212, and then in 59 he was tested without having just done a 3-week training period, and he was down to 191. So he must have fallen off towards the end. But pretty interesting.
Which is closer to the time when he was doing this.
Yeah. So so when they say he missed that whole target, did they say the year that was?
It must have been the second time.
The second time. So
yeah.
He was fairly decent at one point though when he was tested.
Yeah. And there are two occasions, and arguably a third occasion, on which he was allegedly seen practicing with the manlinger in the period prior to the assassination. Okay, so that those are all factors here, and that I want as I said, that you've got the big syllabus here. The big syllabus, the big 150 pager, has got lots of stuff for you to look at, and lots of readings for you to read, lots of active sites that you can pop onto, and that they'll give you all kinds of information here that you're looking for. What you want to be able to do is you want to be able to start to precise your questions as you're doing now. Has anybody checked on his marksmanship capabilities? Has anybody else asked the question, about why in the world would someone be running around with their own identification if they're going to kill somebody? Has anybody checked on who did the tests here? What you do is you'll start to develop an instinct for seeking out the question that is going to occur to you if you think hard enough about it. So what we're doing is I'm not trying to persuade you to have to adopt some theory other than the theory that Oswald killed the president and killed him all along. I'm just trying to assist you guys in figuring out how you do an intelligent analysis of alternative theories of the crime and try to understand what might motivate people to either agree with this theory, because there's all kinds of people who agree with the theory that Oswald committed the crime and did it all by himself, who don't, I can assure you, don't know anything about this information. So it wasn't this information that convinced them that it was true. Something else did. For example, saying, well, the people that were on the Warren Commission said so. You know, and I tend to be a guy that believes what the government tells me. You know, and there are others saying, you know, I've got an uncle who's in the FBI, and he's a nice guy, and I trust him, and so therefore whatever the FBI says is okay with me. So there are different reasons why people would believe these things, but I can assure you that there's not 1/10 of 1,000th of a percent of people in the country that know this information that we just talked about here today. They just don't know that. All they know is that people that were in charge said so. Okay? And so that we're going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what other people think.
Sorry, this is to shift gears, but
right.
this may or may not be significant. But the question comes to my mind is, whose idea was it to go out drinking, like the Secret Service, to go out drinking? Were they invited out? Did one of them have to persuade the others?
Yes. Most Secret Service guys I know, you don't have to persuade them very hard. But that's a good question. That's a good question. You know, who was there anybody in their ambience that was trying to coax them into going out that particular night? You know, it's a perfectly solid question. But
was there some correlation to Jack Ruby with that, like the strippers or something?
You're talking about the Carousel Club. Yeah. No, it was a different club.
Oh, okay.
It was a friend. It was a friends club, a friend of Jack Ruby. You know, but given the fact that, you know, they have similar types of clubs, strip clubs, they probably know each other.
Yeah.
Most people in that business know each other, and so. But that's an interesting question. And one of the things that we'll see as we go along is you know, how complex a conspiracy does it take to have something like that happen? You know, that they send somebody out to find the Secret Service guys and go out and get them laid, you know, the night before. You know, I mean, that's fairly sophisticated. You know, but on the other hand, Central Intelligence Agency is the most sophisticated operation around. You know?
In the book, Brothers, I think it was Clint Hill who was interviewed about it, and then I watched the interview, and he even said that it would be easy to bypass them. It's like, it's not hard. Because the interviewer asked him, he's like, it honestly would be hard to bypass us.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, no. I mean, I've talked to a lot of guys that are in this line of work, and they say, don't kid yourself. You know? If someone is willing to give themselves up, you know, they can get anybody. You know? And that's part of the problem now with Al Qaeda and other people, that the problem is that they're willing to give themselves up. In fact, they're inclined to want to give themselves up. And that makes it a lot harder. You know, because most of the security systems are set up around the theory that the person is going to try to do it and get away. And so they figure out how to block all of those particular avenues. But if somebody's willing to give themselves up, they'll walk right in and do it, and they'll be all standing there surprised. You know, but it's important to point out. And again, I want to be careful not to get ahead of ourselves here. You know, but the fact is that there were specific reports that were coming in that were saying specifically that the president is going to be assassinated with a high-power rifle from a high building, you know, during a motorcade, from an open window. You know, now that doesn't necessarily take a great genius to suggest that that might be what's going to happen, but they're that specific. Those kind of things. Yeah, so let me just check with the students here, Terry, first. Okay. Yeah. Found out about it and retaliated against him.
Didn't you say in the beginning of class, like the first week that never actually happened? You do not ever believe that.
Which?
That we set up some kind of assassination attempt to kill Fidel Castro. Did you say that?
Oh no. No. Never. No. That what we said is that the Kennedy brothers didn't do it.
Oh, okay.
I said that's not true. Okay. That the assertion has been made that the Kennedy brothers, were trying to assassinate him, and that therefore it's logical to think that someone retaliated against it. Sarah, I'm right to you. Yes. Right.
I was just going to say it's not a book you might necessarily want to look up for the course, but it's relevant. But the head of Fidel Castro's counter, intelligence force, Fabian Escalante, was there during the time. He wrote a series of books later, and one of them was called Executive Action, and the subtitle was 634 Ways to Kill Fidel Castro, because that's how many assassinations happened.
Yeah, there's no doubt that was going on, but it just wasn't. Yes.
And then David Sanchez was part of a CIA-led team that was called Executive Action, right?
Sanchez Morales.
Yeah.
David Sanchez Morales. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Terry.
Dan, interestingly enough, what is your own opinion from all the evidence you've seen? No, I'm not going to ask for a bottom line yet. On who decided on the motorcade route? Now, obviously, I also worked in the White House. I also participated in presidential security details in some fashion. I'm appalled at the lack of professionalism, let's put it that word, and screw-ups demonstrated by the Secret Service here, and also more recently involving the Bolivia trip, I believe it was that Obama had. The route, though, is known. Every Secret Service agent has the map list, has all of that derived reasons to coordinate. Who decided on the route? Was it Lyndon Johnson who said we're going to go to Dallas, etc.? I mean, why was Kennedy at Dealey Plaza? How did that happen? And how many people would have known that? How many weeks or months in advance?
It was not weeks or months in advance. The discussions about what alternative routes they were going to be taking was decided. They finally resolved that just about a week or so beforehand, and it was published in the newspaper in Dallas. So people could come to see him if they wanted to stand along the routes, which means that it was about a week or so beforehand, and as you know, I mean, one of the very first things that you try to do is that if you're going to have an open motorcade, the sealing of the windows in the high structures around a motorcade like that is the very first order of business. Because those are just absolute, duck shoots, if you get a guy up in a place like that. But we know that much about it, and I'm not sure we'll figure out who made the decision ultimately.
There's quite a bit about this.
Yes.
I mean, right down to Connolly being involved in the route, to a route being two alternate routes, one where they were going to go straight and not make that turn.
That turn,
Because the police led the turn going that way. So there's speculation that the police were involved in some way of making sure it went that way. Mm-hmm. But they did violate all kinds of things that day, including going below 44 miles per hour without, Fletcher Prouty goes into that, the standard operating procedure that they did to protect the president there. And they just threw it all out the window that day.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. But it's important to point out in this regard the assumption of the expertise on the part of Secret Service and others. There's an old Irish aphorism that I'll probably cite more than once before we get done here. But the Irish refer to Ireland as the old sod, It's kind of a term of art they use to refer to Ireland. And there's an old Irish aphorism that says, "Ah, well, the old sod, it isn't what it used to be, but then it never was." Okay. So there's this assumption that the Secret Service are really top drawer all the time, and they're right on the button, and everything is spitting pods, they're right on it, but none of that is true. I mean, any time you get into anything, and I mean virtually anything in life. Now, at this particular point in time in your career, our job as the adult teaching generation is to teach you all of the ideal things and how things are as clear as possible and how everything is structured to work, and you learn how the government works and what the rules are and all. You have to learn those things first, and then as soon as you get out into the outside world, you begin to discover that ain't how it really works. But in this particular case, I've talked to a lot of folks in Secret Service details and in personal security and stuff like that, and they all know that even if they're functioning at 98% levels of efficiency and effectiveness, that the person that they're in charge of can be killed almost at any day because they can't possibly protect them. If they're out in the public and they're out doing the things that they do, they can guard against some of the more obvious dangers. But a person who is definitely devoted to doing it and isn't just a nutcase. Somebody who drives their car up to the White House lawn and tries to jump over the fence, with a .22 rifle to go kill the president, is almost certainly going to get caught. But a person who's intelligent, as everybody acknowledges Oswald was, and that he's devoted to doing it, that there's enough evidence around that people have been able to do these kind of things, that it doesn't discount his ability to have done something like this. Okay? Yes?
I just want to mention Parkland, the movie is at the Nick tonight only, 7:30 and 9:30.
So there's a 9:30 show you can all rush right to
Right.
when we get done here. Okay? So we're going to have, yes, we'll do one more. We're going to get, there's a big 15-minute break. You can all go and have turkey dinner or whatever it is, and then come back here. But don't trip to faint out on me and kind of fall asleep. Yeah.
Okay. Going off the parade route thing.
Yes.
I recently watched JFK by Oliver Stone, and obviously it's a slightly biased movie, so I don't know if this is entirely factual, but the movie claimed that it was the mayor of Dallas that changed the parade route, or at least confirmed to have it changed. And that
Cabal.
Yes, and the mayor's brother was
the deputy
CIA director that got fired over the Bay of Pigs.
Really? Deputy director.
Oh,
really?
Yes.
That's what the movie claimed. I don't know if it's entirely factual.
Yeah, Cabal. Cabal's brother was the mayor of Dallas. And I've spoken with Cabal's son at some length about all of this. But it is true. It's a little bit nerve-wracking to know about that. Okay, yes, Seth.
Whose brother was the mayor?
The mayor was the brother of the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency, who, along with Allen Dulles, was fired by Kennedy in September and October of 1962. Cabal. Just in a closing on this, so that you also want to know, for those who want to research it, that Cabal, prior to being the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency, was in charge of Operation Blue Book to do the major investigation for the United States Air Force of UFOs. Okay, there's the break. So everybody can go grab something to eat.